Hey, Mike with Nerd Problems Gaming here. In today's video, we'll be doing a review and how to play video on the horror game show board game. So let's get into it. Alright, so now that we've got the game out, let's jump into a bit more on how you play the game and how you set everything up so you have a better understanding on how the game works, and then I'll jump into my review after that. And so the horror game show takes place in a dystopian world, and it's the latest hit reality TV show where 12 competitors will enter the arena and need to survive for 12 hours through a series of unimaginable horrors, facing off against each other, psychopathic hunters, and the arena itself to be the last player standing. And so the game is pretty gruesome, and as you can see, it's pretty massive as well. So let's jump into the setup. And so the first thing that you want to do is you'll find these massive boards. There's 4 of them, and this is going to make up the arena. And so you can actually arrange these in any way you want. Just make sure that the paths are attached to each other, but you can place them any order around the board in any direction you want. From there, you're going to want to set up the show board at the top, and there's a few different steps in this process. First, you'll find the achievement cards and place these on the board. They have the trophy on the back. Then you'll find these green challenge cards, shuffle these up and place them on the board. You'll take the different event cards, shuffle these up and place them on the board. There's intrigue cards, again, shuffle these and place them out. You'll take the round tracker, this little clock symbol, and place it on the round. In this case, we'll put it on round 1, and that's the setup of the show board. From there, you're going to want to set up the studio board. And so how that works, players will choose a color, and you'll find all the cards with this symbol here in the bottom with their associated matching color. So in this case, this player is blue. So I'll take these cards, I can shuffle them up, put them in that pile. Players will get 3 random contract cards, so shuffle those up and each player will get 3 of those. You also want to set your fan meter and your money meter. So the money starts at 0, and your fan meter will start at 3 at the beginning of the game. Now, depending on the number of players, players will then draw what contestant cards and players they'll play as throughout the game. And so you can do this in a drafting fashion, where players will take turns choosing which character they want to have on their team, or you can randomize it, where you see there's these little blip tokens with the characters in them. You can put these all face down, shuffle them up, and then deal them out to your players. So in this case, we're building out a 2-player game, so each player would get 6 characters. You also find the characters' action cards with their little symbol in the bottom there. So make sure each character has those set up, and you'll shuffle those up together with your starting cards here. You also want to find the associated standee with your character. You can set those off to the side now with your player boards, and you'll eventually be placing these characters on the map. You also want to get life cubes for each character and just place it on the top marker on each card, associating that the characters have full life. From here, you're going to want to find all the hunter boards in the game, place those out. You can take the little hunter blip symbols with their image on them, set those there as well. The little red hunter standees you can set out. You'll find the hunter's ability cards here as well. Place them next to their boards. Set the hunter's life tracks to full. And then you'll also want to go into the rule book, as some hunters will have specific items that they start with at the beginning of the game. So just look for that image right next to the specific hunter in the rule book to break that down. Set these all off to the side for now, as they won't immediately be added to the game. The next thing you'll want to do is find these little question mark tokens and look for 4 of them that have this trapdoor symbol. You're going to want to set these off to the side, and then out of the remaining question mark symbols, you want to find 24 other symbols and keep these all face down and put both the trapdoors and the 24 remaining symbols face down. Now you can see it's already been done here, but the next step is going to be setting out the board. Now prior to doing that, you want to make sure you assign the media's favorite token to the player that most recently watched a horror movie, or again, you can just randomly assign this as well, as they're going to start off as the first person to put out one of their characters. And so there's a couple different ways you can do this. One is that you can take turns between players, taking your standee and placing them on any symbol that has this red dot. And so there's a bunch of them around the board. As you can see, this has already been set up. But again, players can take turns placing their standees anywhere where there's an open red dot. And when you start off, the entire board is open. The question marks won't be all over. So you'll have a lot of options on where you can play your players. Once the players are out, you'll take your pile of 28 question mark tokens. So again, 4 of the trapdoors and 24 other random ones, and place them throughout the board on those red dot symbols. That will fill out all the symbols on the board, and you're basically ready to start the game at that point. Now, as I mentioned, there are two ways to set up the board. Another option you can do is instead of laying the standees face up on the board, you can take your player token symbols, mix those all up in your giant pile of question marks. And so you'll have the 28 tokens, 4 being the trapdoor, 24 random ones, and then all of the player symbols, shuffle those up and place all of them face down around the board. Now there's advantages and disadvantages to both versions of the setup. Obviously, if the players are out, you can see where they are, and it might help you make moves a little bit better, but then weaker players are more exposed. Whereas if you go the other option and the players are all hidden throughout the board, you don't really know where they are until someone interacts with that question mark. So you'll have to choose on your own which version you want to play with when you start off the game. Alright, so now that the game is set up, let's jump into the actual gameplay and how that works. And so again, the goal of the game is to make the most money by the end of the game. And to do that, you'll be acting as the producer of the show, controlling a team of characters, and you'll have the ability to battle other characters around the board, recruit hunters, and try and have the last player standing. And you'll earn points in a variety of ways, from killing players, meeting your challenges, and reaching achievements at the end of the game. And so to start off, one of the first things you want to do is look at the contracts that you received at the beginning of the game, as this will give you some insights or general goals you want to try and achieve to earn extra money if you complete them throughout the game. You want to keep those secret from the other players, but they can be a great way to earn extra money and help you win the game. And so throughout the phases, there's specific steps that you want to go through. Now the beginning phase consists of 4 different steps. The first one is revealing, the next is drawing cards, the next is an event, and then the next is a challenge card. Now you can see on the round tracker, special things happen on rounds 3, 6, and 9. And so if you happen to be on one of those rounds, the reveal phase happens first. Now during the reveal phase, you want to look at the symbol on the different rounds. And so you can see in round 3, 6, and 9, there's black squares, red squares, and white squares. And so the red square will indicate at the beginning of the reveal step, you want to flip up all the question mark symbols within that bigger square. So for how the board is set up right now, you would flip over all the question marks on this square tile if it was the beginning of round 3. You can also see the black squares, and that indicates that at the ending phase, you're actually going to completely remove that square from the game, and any items on that are discarded, and any players or hunters on that square are immediately killed. So something to pay attention to as you play the game. Now after the reveal phase, you're going to move on to the card drawing phase. So the card drawing phase is pretty simple. You're just going to draw 5 cards from your pile here, and these will be cards you can use in your turn throughout the main phase. So both players will draw up to 5 cards, and once players have drawn their hands, the next step is to reveal an event card. And again, that's these blue TV symbol cards here. And so with the event cards, you'll just simply read what happened and activate the event and leave this face up in the discard pile, and this event is active throughout the round. You'll then reveal a challenge card, which is this green card. And so again, this actually applies to all players, and so this is a challenge that is happening throughout the round, and players that complete this challenge are going to earn $3 at the end of the round. And any number of players can complete this, and they can all earn this prize of $3 if they complete this challenge. So again, you'll just leave that up for people to view and try and complete throughout the round. And so after those 4 steps are done, you're going to move into the main phase. And this starts off with a fight for media attention. And so the fight for a media attention token is something you want to strive for, as it allows you to recruit hunters and add them to your team, which can be very powerful in defeating other characters for your team. And so how this works for control of the media's attention, players will go around the table saying how many cards they wish to discard. And so it will start with the person currently holding the token, and they can say how many cards they wish to discard. They don't have to discard any, but they'll choose how many they want to discard. Now it will continue to move around the table from player to player, and if you wish to discard cards, you need to do at least 1 more card than the previous player before you did. And after it goes around the table, the players that have discarded the most cards in this fashion will gain control of the media attention token. And so once it's decided who has the media attention, you'll move on to the rest of the main phase. So at this point, we move on to playing cards from your hand and taking your turn. And so how this works is you'll have a variety of cards that you've drawn, and you can play them on your turn. Now there's a couple symbols you want to pay attention to. One of them is the symbol here, either the play symbol or the pause symbol. And so how this works is you can continue to keep playing cards until you've played this pause symbol. You can also stop at any time, so if you just wanted to play one card, you could say you're done at that point, but you could play multiple cards with the play symbol in a row. But for sure, you have to stop playing once you have that pause symbol. Now on top of that, cards have two different options. You can either use a card for movement, or you can use the specific action listed on the card. And again, it's one or the other. Now another thing you need to pay attention to is the symbol on the cards. Some of them will be this generic symbol, which is just your player's color. That means you can use them whenever you want. But if it has a specific player's symbol, that player needs to be alive and it can only be used for that specific player on the board. But outside of that, you can look at the symbols here. The blue symbol here means it's for contestants, and the red symbol here means it's for hunters. And if it has one of each, you could apply it to either. You get to choose. Now when you look at your player board, this showcases how far they can move if you activate that move action. So for example, if John Smith here wanted to take an action from a move card, they could move up to 6 spaces. You don't have to use the entire full movement, but you can if you want to. So let's say I went ahead and did that. I'm going to play this card for movement and activate John Smith. So at this point, I just find John Smith on the board and I could move 6 spaces. Now when it comes to moving, you can move in a horizontal and vertical fashion or even diagonally, and that still only counts as 1 space. Now if I end up on a question mark, I have to reveal it and see what it is. So in this case, it's a doping item, so I could actually add this to my inventory for my character. And so you can see John Smith only has 1 open hand, so I could then place that in my inventory for them to hold. He couldn't hold any more items beyond that though. Now again, I could continue to play cards with the play symbol and continue my turn, or I could stop at this point and pass to the other player. Now one thing to note too is that some cards will say reaction here in the description, and these actually will activate in reaction to something else another player has done. So it might be initiating an attack or a whole variety of different things. But one thing to note is that you can play those cards on another player's turn when the situation arises that would activate the reaction. However, if you had ended your turn with a pause symbol, you would not be able to play those reaction cards. So only if you end your turn with a play symbol and it moves to the other player's turn, could you use reaction cards in response to something they did. Now another thing to cover are the different blips that you might find scattered throughout the board. You can find weapons that your characters can equip, contestants that you'll need to flip up and add to the table if you're playing in the hidden mode style, pillows you can use for extra defense to block the first wound that comes in, traps that you'll need to deal with that could potentially harm your character. And how this works is when you step on a trap, it has an associated wound number that you're going to take. However, you'll roll your number of movement die for your movement range of the character, and each one that's a 4 or higher, you'll be able to ignore one of the wounds created by that trap. There's tunnels, and these work as adjacent spaces, so if there's 2 of them flipped up, you can quickly travel across the board. First aid kits will heal 4 wounds to your character and are discarded after using them. Doping allows you to immediately move a character, and pills allow you to re-roll 3 die during a fight. So you'll be able to equip these items and find them throughout the game, hidden in the question symbols. Now another thing that might happen as you're playing through the game is that you might decide to attack other players. So how that works is if you moved your piece into another player's location, you would initiate an attack and move to that phase. Okay, so now we're looking at the attacking phase, and this is how this works. So first thing that you want to do is look at the number of fists associated with the character, and that's going to indicate how many die you'll roll in an attack. Now if you have equipped weapons that you found throughout the game, that might boost this number as well, or potentially other cards that you've played on your turn. But in this case, we're just going to go with the base numbers of 4 and 5. And so how it works, both players will roll their die and then arrange their die in descending order. And so you'll put the highest number to the right, working your way down from there. And so we've done that in this case, where Adrian's numbers are on top and then John's are on the bottom. And this is how you're going to calculate wounds. And so another thing to pay attention to as well is this critical hit number with the skull. If you roll that number or higher, you're automatically going to wound a player for each die you did that with. So in this case, when we look at the players, neither of them actually rolled a critical hit in this case, so we're okay. But you're going to compare the 2 numbers. And so in this case, if I look at the 5 and the 4, the 5 is higher, so Adrian would receive 1 wound for that roll. We go to the next one, 4 is bigger than 3. So again, Adrian would receive another move. 3 is bigger than 2, 3 is bigger than 1. And in the case when there's not a die present, you treat the non-existent die as a 1. And in any time when there's a tie, neither player receives a wound. So in this case, Adrian did not do very well. He lost every single one except for the one where it was a tie. So he's going to receive 4 wounds and bring his health down by 4 points. Another thing to note is that if you're involved in a fight, you're going to earn 1 fan. On top of that, if you're the player that kills another player, you win an additional fan for killing someone. Another thing to note is that fans can be used throughout your turn as sacrifices to grant additional abilities. And so you can see I've got 4 fans here, and if I wanted to, I could activate them as this player. So one of the options I could do is if I sacrifice 2 fans, I could re-roll one of my chosen die during a fight for every 2 fans that I sacrifice. And so again, had I done that, I could have sacrificed a couple fans to improve my die roll, and I can only re-roll 1 die per every 2 fan I sacrifice. I could sacrifice more than 2 fans, so I could do 4 and re-roll 2 die, but I can't do this multiple times in a fight. I have to either decide to do it or not do it. I could also sacrifice 2 fans for $1, or 3 fans, I could draw an intrigue card. And so again, the intrigue card are these puzzle piece cards. And so I could draw one of those, which could give me a very powerful ability. Another option is that if I sacrifice 3 fans, I could immediately reveal any blip on the board I choose. So I could flip one over and see what was underneath. Now another potential thing you could do if you happen to have this token here, or play a special card from your hand, could be recruiting a hunter. And so how that works, you would just simply pick one of the hunters from the pool here, and then you'll add them to your team. And so what you'll do then, if you collected this hunter, for example, of Emmanuel, you'd take the cards from their deck, shuffle them in to your draw deck here, and then they would also enter the arena. And so how that works is there's different entry points around the board, and so you just need to look and see where those are located. So they're just the little outside spaces here on the board is where these players can come in. And then they can be another option that you can control around the board to kill other players and earn money and achieve your goals. And so once players have taken all of their actions, you'll move into the ending phase. Alright, so the final phase of the round is the ending phase. And so there's a couple steps you'll take during this phase. One is the completion of challenges and contracts. So at this time, if you've completed any contracts, you'll collect the reward listed on the card. On top of that, you'll review the challenge card from the round, and any player that completed this challenge will earn the respective reward listed on the card. At this time, players are going to discard any cards that they played. So if you played specific cards from your hand already, you'll discard them. And then you can also choose to discard any additional cards you don't want from your hand. On top of that, during the round, you don't have any hand size limit. However, at the end of the round during this phase of discarding, you need to discard down to at least 5 cards. So you can hold 5 or fewer cards in your hand at the end of the round. So if you have more than 5, discard down to that amount at this point. Now once that has happened, you'll actually move on to the next round. So you'll simply move up the round tracker and you'll repeat these phases to round out the game. Now how the game ends, that can happen in several different ways. One is that there's 1 player left standing, so 1 standee left on the board. There are no standees left on the board, or you reach the end of round 12. At that point, you're just simply going to add up the amount of money that you have, and the players with the most money are going to win the game. And so what you need to do at this point is a couple of different things you'll add to tally extra points at the end of the game. So the first thing you want to do is track the achievements listed on the board. So in this case, you'll go through and see who achieved these specific achievements. And if there's a tie or no one actually achieved the achievement, they just won't be distributed. So only use the ones that actually were achieved by a specific player. So again, these are worth dollar points at the end of the game. They'll check their contracts to see if there's any bonuses they get for that. Players will also receive $2 for each trophy of a defeated character or hunter. So again, how that happens is if you kill a character, you add their little standee as a trophy to the character that killed them. And so again, these trophies are worth $2 for each contestant that the character has and $3 for each hunter the character has. Players will also receive $2 for each contestant they have that has survived the game. At this time, you can also sacrifice your fans, turning them into dollars. So you'll get $1 for every 2 fans. And again, the players with the most dollars at the end of the game will win the game. If there happens to be a tie, the tie goes to player with the most trophies. If there's still a tie, it goes to the player that has the most trophies that are hunters. And if there's still a tie, everybody loses, the fans are angry, and nobody wins. But again, this wraps up the basics of the game, but definitely check out the rulebook for more specific details on every single rule of the game. But I think this gives you a general idea on how the game works and how it's played. So with that done, let's jump into my review. Well, now that you have a better understanding on how the game works, how do I actually feel about it? Well, I think the horror game show board game does a great job of immersing you in the experience and fits very well thematically. There's a ton of stuff going on, typical to what you'd experience in a reality TV game show. There's contestants, there's traps, there's prizes, there's fans, there's crazy twists and turns and much more. There's a huge cast of characters, there's nods to classic horror film characters and much more. And so I think they really did a great job thematically with the game, and it plays out like you're playing a game show as well. Now obviously the theme is not really family friendly, and so it's not necessarily going to apply to everyone, but I think if you're a fan of the horror genre, if you've watched a lot of classic horror movies and current horror movies, and you like the overall concept of a mashup between a game show, the Hunger Games, and horror movies, I think you'll enjoy this game. I think the cards within the game as well fit right into the theme. I think the secret contract cards are another cool addition to the game, as they give you secret hidden objectives to earn more money at the end of the game. So they might be things like even helping your opponents, or helping the players to the left of you survive or the right of you survive, or you're maybe trying to make sure that their hunters don't die. Or again, it might be a goal of wiping out the player next to you and killing all their contestants, and a variety of other secret objectives as well. And so I think this adds a unique spin to the game and makes you feel like you're playing in a crazy reality game show, and really keeps you on your toes because you don't really ever know exactly what the person next to you is doing. The events are similar to this as well, where it might be things like powering up hunters, poison gas filling the arena, and much more. On top of that, I think the game has a really high replay value just because there's so much going on. There's different ways you can arrange the board every single time you play. You can play it where the contestants are face up and everyone can see them. You can play where they're hidden and not knowing where they're at. You can introduce crazed hunters to the game, taking out players. You can attack your own players, and there's so many different ways to earn money and fans throughout the game. Your strategy can evolve and be completely different every time you play. Now, along with that huge replay value and variety of things going on, that can actually potentially be a downside as well. So I think if you're more of a casual gamer or don't want to commit a lot of time to this game, it might be pretty difficult to get it to the table. The setup can feel a little complex the first few times you do it, and really understanding how all the components interact with each other, how the fighting works, how moving your character works, introducing hunters to the game, dealing with contracts, challenge cards, events, and much more can really seem overwhelming at first. But I think once you get the hang of the rules and understand the overall flow of the game, it's not too bad, but it might be a turnoff and a little bit hard to get casual gamers on board when you're trying to introduce this game to the table. With that in mind as well, the game does take up a lot of space. I've got an 8-foot gaming table set up where I put the game on, and it was taking up a majority of the table. So again, definitely have some room allocated for this game when you play it. Another thing that I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, but just something to be aware of as well, is that when you're playing with fewer players, it might be a little bit hard to activate all of your players every single turn. You start off with 5 cards that you can use as actions, but even at the start of the game, you have 6 contestants to work with, plus you might be adding in additional hunters on top of that. Obviously, players will die throughout the game, so it's not as big of a deal later on as you'll be whittled down to fewer players. But initially, it might be hard to coordinate an attack or coordinate all of your characters with the limited amount of cards that you have to use. Now, this might be by design as well, but if you're playing with more people than just 2 players, you'll have fewer contestants to control, and it might feel like you have a better control of your team versus scrambling to move everyone around in the earlier stages of the game. Again, obviously not a deal breaker, but it's something to consider when you're playing. This game is also likely not a short play session. Now there's a lot of different ways for the game to end. You can get down to the final survivor, you can eliminate all of the survivors on the game, or you reach the end of the 12th round. And so depending on how skilled you are and the players you're playing with are, it could end up being a pretty long game to get through all of those different rounds if you aren't finishing off characters rather quickly. Again, not a bad thing necessarily, but it can be a pretty long play time when you play through the game. So definitely prepare for that going in. Now the version I'm playing was a prototype version, so some of the components might change, some of the rules might change changed a little bit in the final release, but I did really enjoy the components of the game. I thought they did a great job on the artwork, the quality of the components. The rulebook was pretty long, but it was understandable, and it gave me a great sense of how to play the game. So I think all of that was done very well. But no, there might be some tweaks in the final version of the game when it comes out. But overall, I think if you like horror games, if you like the overall concept of a horror game show that, again, like I talked about, combines elements of the Hunger Games, horror movies, and reality TV, and you have the time to play it and learn the game, I think you'll really enjoy it. And so if you'd like to pick up a copy of the game, there'll be a link in the description below. And if you like videos like this on video games, board games, and everything nerdy, check out one of our other videos here. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to get the latest updates of new nerd videos we put out. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.